So, folks, you might have heard this term DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And obviously, it's become the new byword, the new catchphrase, the new slogan for everything bad and wrong in government and business. And thus, it must be purged systematically. Anything and anyone who might in any way be compromised by diversity, equity, and inclusion. You know, heck, if you've got like different black historical figures, why that could be a symbol of diversity. If you've got any historically oppressed groups of people who may have different entries in the various books about history, that could be um, equity, talking about their stories, including them definitely part of DEI, you know? And very importantly, one of the things that often gets left out of DEI is the A. Just DEIA. They like to call it DEI so they can do a clever thing where they switch the I and the E and then it just spells die, you know? And like it just kind of seems maybe not good actually that they're trying to get rid of this. In fact it's actually bad that they're trying to get rid of that, cuz like honestly when I think of like I don't know, a library full of books about different historical or political figures, one of the things I tend to think about is like different figures in history, like that's kind of one of the things I tend to think about. Like I think about, I don't know, I'm just gonna pull this out um of a hat here, but like I tend to think about things like, I don't know, historical works about slavery or civil rights. And like, maybe it's a good thing that libraries have books about, the historical time period when slavery was commonplace in America, or, the fight against like the historical effects of slavery, i.e., the civil rights movement. Maybe I think libraries should have that actually. It's almost like a bedrock principle I have that books have different not books, but libraries have books about different kinds of people. And that A is also really important. We'll maybe circle back around to it, but for the time being know that it stands for accessibility. Huh. So we don't want diversity, equity, inclusion, or accessibility. Well, that's interesting. Seemingly on an unrelated note, books mentioning slavery, civil rights, removed from shelves at Fort Campbell schools. Now you might be like, what is Fort Campbell? Well, let's get to it. At an elementary school at Fort Campbell, home of the 101st Airborne Division, librarians are hard at work scrubbing the shelves, but they aren't scrubbing for dust. They're scrubbing for books that contain references to slavery, the civil rights movement, or anything else related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. On February 6th, the DODEA, I'm not going to say it like that again, DODEA, Department of Defense Education Activity, sent to administrators and school employees at 161 schools around the world a letter to ensure compliance with executive orders and recent Department of Defense guidance. The letter, a copy of which was obtained by Clarksville Now, lays out several new directives. Many of them were expected, including that programs designated for girls may only be accessed by biological females, and that signage for restrooms and locker rooms must use terms such as women and men or girls and boys. But the document also bans celebration or promotion of monthly cultural observances. This includes the immediate cancellation of any celebrations underway. At Fort Campbell schools, that meant teachers had to remove all bulletin boards that reference Black History Month and Black leaders such as Martin Luther King Jr., Harriet Tubman, and Rosa Parks. According to a source speaking to Clarksville Now on condition of anonymity, Fort Campbell schools are also canceling plans for Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. There's no word yet on Women's History Month set for March. Another directive calls for the removal of all books and materials related to discriminatory equity ideology during an operational compliance review. Librarians are instructed to ensure any such books are removed from the student section of the information center and placed in the professional collection. So, yeah, they literally removed any mention of Martin Luther King Jr. from bulletin boards because that'd be too much Black history for schools. And you might be wondering why 161 schools all across the world, and it's because the federal government directly controls these schools. You see, they are military schools. They are schools for the children of service members. So that's cool. And yeah, it's well, let's go down to the very bottom here. Ironically, some of these history books on civil rights might reference the deployment of the 101st Airborne to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957 to protect Black students during the desegregation of a high school, a pivotal moment in civil rights history. That's right! The home of the 101st Airborne can't even talk about one of their proudest moments where they helped integrate schools in America. Okay, genuine question. How the fuck do books about slavery and civil rights relate to DEI? Because they're about Black people. It is because the books are about Black people, and DEI is just slang in conservative circles for anything to do with non-white people, non-straight people, women, just in general as a category. Anyone who's outside of the category of white, straight, cis man, not, that's DEI. Anything in history worth learning to these people was done by white, straight, cis dudes. Oh, sorry, Christian dudes. That's another important aspect. Obviously, no white, straight, cis man who's not Christian has ever been able to accomplish anything. And true, not disabled. They also have to be have been able-bodied through the majority of their life, probably. Otherwise, it's DEI. Yep. Also, no pores. We don't want pores. That's too much inclusion. Maybe a little bit too much equity. You know?
Soon they'll stop teaching World War II because of DDEI Day.
That was a stretch, but I still appreciated it, Sake Tanuki. But yeah, I mean, like, it's getting pretty blatant here. Like, on Valentine's Day, just a handful of days ago, folks, Missouri's Attorney General. Now, Just real quick, when you guys think of an attorney general, do you think of someone who's genuinely pretty busy? You know, who genuinely like has their hands tied and their attention taken up by various prominent court cases? Yeah, yeah. Well, apparently the Attorney General of Missouri has so little going on that Andrew Bailey, which is his name here, is suing Starbucks for having too many workers that are women and non-white. And the lawsuit says that because they employ too many non-whites and women, consumers are paying higher prices and wait longer for goods because because they are less qualified. This is straight up like you took a man from like 1892 and time traveled them to 2025. Like that is what they are arguing. They are arguing that inherently women and non-white people are less good at jobs. That's it. It's incredible. Here are a couple excerpts provided by Judd Legum. As of September 28th, 2024, Starbucks workforce was 8.1% Black, 31.7% Hispanic, 5.6% Asian, 47.8% White, 0.6% American Indian or Alaska Native, and 0.5% Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. Starbucks U.S. workforce was 70.9% women and 28.4% men. In other words, since 2020, Starbucks workforce has become more female and less white. Yep. That is the state of Missouri versus Starbucks Corp. Making hiring decisions on non-merit considerations will skew the hiring pool towards people who are less qualified to perform their work, increasing costs for Missouri's consumers. This is because more mistakes are made. More time is required to train and make up for such mistakes, even though mistakes would occur less and resources, including time and materials, would be better preserved by employees with better and actual job qualifications. So with Starbucks' discriminatory patterns, practices, and policies, Missouri's customers are required to pay higher prices and wait longer for goods and services that could be provided for less had Starbucks employed the most qualified workers, regardless of their race, color, sex, or national origin. And like, dog, the what more qualified applicants? Where are you going to find the overwhelmingly white workforce that is educated and like experienced in baristaing? I have to imagine it's pretty rare for someone to pull up to Starbucks and have like a long and storied history as a barista. That seems weird. I have a sinking feeling what their real motivation is with this lawsuit. Yeah, I mean it's literally to reimpose the norms of like the 1890s in the modern era, to reimpose Jim Crow, to reimpose like explicit patriarchy. And I can't remember where I saw this, but I think maybe there's a kernel of truth to it. And part of it is that when economic times are good, relatively good, a predominantly white population, may see people who are more marginalized come into everyday jobs, um, as those who are less marginalized kind of do better in the economy, right? And so you got these white men who are relatively middle class and they just kind of go about their business at day to day. But when the economy is doing a little bit better, they start seeing more marginalized people in like service industry jobs. And they start freaking out about that. They start perceiving it as like, oh, suddenly there are all these minorities around. And during worse economic times, those jobs tend to be taken up by less marginalized people, white folks. And then they are like, ah, yes, this is how things should be. But when they start seeing it not be that anymore, they start freaking out. They start thinking of it as like, clearly something has gone wrong. When things are better, like you see these black and brown people are taking jobs from the precious white children workers. And so, like, I mean, in a way, it is also an attack on like, gender nonconforming, trans folks and like gay people, etc. Because who hasn't encountered a blue-haired barista? Um, are we just going to have a lawsuit because the workers have dyed hair piercings, red?
Next, they can go after
Yes,
the all-deaf
exactly.
staffed and owned by deaf in Washington, D.C.
I mean, Chris Huggy, it's a bit worse than that, unfortunately, but we'll get there. Um, Basically, folks, the entire plan here is that they want to use DEI's very convenient springboard to help them cut these workers, to help them cut down the federal workforce, in like government, right? And they want that to kind of flow out into society. So these lawsuits further that aim, while further the aim of their white supremacy, essentially. And it also provides them more cover and a rationale that, at least to conservatives, when they start seeing all these lawsuits parroted and put forward by Fox News and whitewashed, etc., um, conservatives go, oh, yeah, I guess we do need to get rid of this DEI. They're getting rid of the DEI at Starbucks. We need to get rid of the DEI in our government, right? It normalizes it. And the issue is they want to go beyond just DEI workers. And so they are working to broaden the scope of what DEI could even feasibly mean in order to then be like, ah, yes, we found more DEI workers in the government outside of explicit DEI, departments, right? But on top of that, okay, we are getting weirder and weirder things, right? Because the US government is very large. It has its fingers in a lot of pies, right? And one of the things here is noted by Hamilton Nolan here on Blue Sky. An AmeriCorps grantee, someone who runs a valuable government-funded social program, has sent me a copy of an executive order compliance instructions that AmeriCorps sent out yesterday, ordering all grantees to certify that their programs don't promote DEI activities. All AmeriCorps grantees are being ordered to either A, certify they don't do anything related to DEI, cease any DEI related activities immediately, or C, lose their grant. Specifies that this includes not just the organization's activities, but also all training materials, social media, and websites. Like, I was shown a letter from one guarantee or grantee. I keep reading it as guarantee. Grantee, who is specifically flagged for non-compliance because their grant application includes the term racial equity. They must now literally certify they are not doing any racial equity related work. Crazy, totalitarian, racist conduct by the feds right now. This is the reality of what's coming through the entire universe of federal government agencies right now. Threats of defunding unless people swear in writing we do not support racial equity. Not very subtle. They're literally making people sign loyalty pledges to like the concept of white supremacy. You know, like it's crazy. You have to certify that you're not in favor of racial equity. Y'all understand that if you're not in favor of racial equity, you're in favor of the other thing, the inverse. And Anders Norup, you bring up an excellent question. On the topic of injured veterans, do they count as DEI? Put a pin in that. We'll be back to that soon enough here. Here is an article from Inside Higher Ed. The Education Department's Office for Civil Rights declared all race-conscious student programming, resources, and financial aid illegal over the weekend and threatened to investigate and rescind federal funding for any institution that does not comply within 14 days. In a Dear Colleague letter published late Friday night, Acting Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights Craig Traynor outlined a sweeping interpretation of Supreme Court's 2023 ruling in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, which struck down affirmative action. While the decision applied specifically to admissions, the Trump administration believes it extends to all race-conscious spending, activities, and programming at colleges. In recent years, American educational institutions have discriminated against students on the basis of race, including white and Asian students, Traynor wrote. These institutions embrace a pervasive and repugnant race-based preferences and other forms of racial discrimination have emanated through every facet of academia. They're literally portraying the idea of desiring racial equity. You know, the idea of equality between racial groups as a disease. They're framing that as a disease. And you have to keep in mind, this is higher education. So any college that accepts federal funding is affected by this. And the crazy thing is, they are totally fine with legacy admissions. With well, I mean, like if your dad went here, obviously we'll preference you to get in here too. That's totally fine. As long as you're not, helping disenfranchised African Americans to get in. That's evil and illegal. But, if you come from an economic class of people where your dad went here, you get in, no problem, sonny boy. Yeah, the Nepo baby track is unaffected. Okay? The letter mentions a wide range of university programs and policies that could be subject to OCR investigation, including hiring, promotion, compensation, financial aid, scholarships, prizes, administrative support, discipline, housing, graduation ceremonies, and all other aspects of student, academic, and campus life. So if you got a group for like African American students on your campus, illegal. You have a scholarship for disenfranchised Latinos, illegal. this is like, make no mistake about it. This is a white supremacy move. This is a move to bar non-white people from higher education. Okay? That's what this is for. This is a move to bar anyone who isn't a white, straight, cis man from going to college. Because guess what, folks? You know what falls under the umbrella of like a DEI scholarship? You know, remember how like all of those opportunities are being taken from women athletes by those dastardly trans college athletes? You guys remember that, right? That was a whole thing that they made about that when it came to like trans kids in sports. Well, seems to me that like a scholarship on the basis of being a woman in sports would be, well, that sounds like DEI to me. Weird. So weird. Malthael, I'd care more about what you had to say if you weren't, you know, like the most inbred person ever conceived of by man. You know, like if your mom and her brother hadn't been fucking, I might respond to you with maybe more kindness, but you know, it's hard when you're, you know, the crevice in your skull that's supposed to contain your brain is literally concave. Yeah, Habsburg in chat over here. Habsburg minus the wealth. Um. Anyway, put simply, educational institutions may neither separate or segregate students based on race, nor distribute benefits or burdens based on race. So, most college leaders have so far remained silent. It's very likely, by the way, that colleges will simply go along with this. Largely because, as so many other aspects of this entire unfolding situation has shown us, have shown us, we have to create the political environment in which these politicians and these you know, supposed leaders will act, because they're cowardly. We have to dedicate ourselves to mobilizing folks and going out and protesting and taking actions of resistance that further create a world in which, you know, people who are too cowardly to stand up right now will be willing to stand up and do something about it. You know, we need to mobilize our folks. Join your local chapter of Indivisible. Join your local Dems. Join your local DSA. Organize, organize, organize. You gotta organize. It's not enough to be a passive observer of this stuff. It's not enough to sit and know that the world should be better. We need to go out and make it so. Join your DSA. Join your Dems. Join Indivisible. Join your progressive victory. Join and act. You know, there was a time in this country where the saying was literally join it or die. Getting dangerously close to a point where that may need to be unmothballed here. But join and act. That's where we're at right now. And remember when I told you all to put a pin? Well, one last thing. Yeah, remember when I mentioned Black History Month? Maryland's National Guard has been kicked out of the Frederick Douglass Parade after the Department of Defense order declares Black History Month dead. This is where we're at, folks. Like, like it's not good out there. And on top of that, we have the real kick in the balls. Okay? We have the real kick in the balls. Remember when I told you guys to put that pin in the A, the accessibility part of DEIA, the A that, well, frankly, conservatives have been dropping largely because the Americans with Disability Act is still in effect and it would be illegal to advocate against it directly. Um, well, just throwing this out there. Dear parent or guardian, we are writing to inform you that the federal government has canceled funding for the Charting My Path for Future Success project funded under the United States Department of Education's evaluation of transition support for youth with disabilities. On February 10th, 2025, the U.S. Department of Education canceled research contracts with Spotsylvania County Public Schools, as well as school districts across the Commonwealth and nation. We received notification at 10:19 p.m. on February 10th, 2025, to immediately cancel anything supported by the Charting My Path for Future Success project funding. The SCPS Charting My Path for Future Success project funded or provided instruction and support for our high school students with disabilities to help prepare for the transition from high school. The cancellation of this program impacts 91 SCPS students and 5 full-time instructors who were funded by the Charting My Path for Future Success program funding. Your child will no longer receive the transition supports that were part of the federally funded Charting My Path for Future Success project. Your child will continue to receive the district support that was provided to your child before they started participating in the program. So, to clarify, the richest man in the world came into the United States government in order to slash federal funding to give himself and the other richest people to ever exist on the face of the earth the largest tax cut in the history of the planet. And in order to do so, he cut your child's special needs programs. In order to do that, he cut funding to educational institutions that value racial equality. He cut funding to libraries that teach about slavery and the civil rights movement in order to give himself and his rich asshole friends, along with Donald J. Trump, the President of the United States, the biggest tax cut in history. That's what's going on here. Fundamentally, that is what is happening here in the United States of America. And if you think, oh, it's not my problem, I've already learned about slavery and the civil rights movement, and I'm not disabled. Haha. I got bad news for you. At some point in your life, you are going to be old, going to be disabled in some kind of way, because that's the nature of getting old. You don't stay able-bodied forever. And you're going to need programs like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. You're going to need those programs. You're going to rely on those programs to live. But the issue is, in order to make that multi-trillion-dollar tax cut for the wealthiest motherfuckers alive, they're going to be cutting those programs too. So if you look at the current story about the normalization of white supremacy, about the destruction of programs that support special needs students? You think it's not going to be your turn at some point? Not going to be your turn next? You're just the kind of sap they were looking for. You were just the kind of sap who they could use to put themselves into power so they could steal from you, your kids, and your children's children. They used you, and they're going to leave you for dead the second it makes them a dollar. That's what this is all about, folks. And that being said, that being said, there are some rays of hope and resistance even in the dark shadow of funding being pulled from innumerable different institutions. And this is a very small example, but like there's something about it that resonates with me. And maybe it's because I'm biased because I'm from Minnesota, you know? But here's a news story. Minneapolis theater group doubles down on DEI initiatives as federal funding is threatened. The theater organization says it recently received orders from the National Endowment for the Arts to stop promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion or be denied federal funding. The Playwrights Center in Minneapolis, Seward neighborhood, which supports programming for playwrights, recently made an appeal to donors after receiving orders from the National Endowment for the Arts to cease operating any programs promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion or be denied federal funding. Hateful rhetoric and policies like these have no place in our artistic communities. What they call DEI is what we call our values. We identify and uplift artists who have been historically marginalized, and we materially support their ability to create their world changing work. Full stop. The Playwrights Center wrote in an email. If you know our mission at Playwright Center, you know we cannot choose to receive money from the government if that means pushing artists back to the margins. We cannot hew to the narrowest possible view of who gets to participate in artistic and civil life. We cannot comply. We cannot betray our mission. We will not be silent. We will continue to support a beautifully diverse and inclusive group of playwrights, offering them the resources they need to create for as long as we are able. But saying no to this money means we will need you to help us keep saying yes. And I do think that ultimately we're going to need to see more of that. We're going to need to see more of that. And if you know anyone who likes to promote the arts or would like to make a donation um, to reward that kind of bravery in the face of overwhelming opposition, just dropped a link to the Playwrights Center in the chat. Understand we're in a dark time. But if we all come together, they can't stop us. There are more of us than there are of them. There's a reason why they're coming after the funds that support all of us. Yeah, Dragonfly, can you link me an article about that? I haven't been able to confirm that, but I did see some claims about that. I haven't been able to back it up though. So with that, good people are starting to wake up and fight. And very soon, every single person in this country is going to have been affected by what they are trying to do to the federal government. And it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but it's going to happen very soon because this tension cannot hold. The legal constitutional crisis we are in will not last forever, cannot last forever. And similarly, the economic effects of everything that they are messing with, everything that they are touching and putting their greasy little billionaire fingers into, it's going to reach everyone in this country at some point soon. At some point soon. It is not sustainable. And the amount of cuts that they are going to have to make are going to be felt by every single person in this country. And when those cuts get felt, when tariffs get dropped, when like our country's economy drops out, everyone is going to know it. Feel like it'll be too late before it comes to a head. Keep in mind, might be too late to stop the tax cuts from going out. But there are going to be an awful lot of people who are going to be angry. Yeah, we do have a non-zero chance of achieving a class consciousness speedrun. There we go.